administrator for all of the certification services that we offer here at HR.com. I'm sitting with our leading program instructor, Jen, and between the two of us, we are going to break down a lot of the background information that you'd want to know if you're thinking about getting your PHR or your SPHR certification. And then we'll also be talking about just some of the services that are available to you to help you prepare and pass one of these exams. So first thing that we want to do here is just walk you through our agenda, which will give you an idea for the different topics we're going to be covering today. Okay, so first off, we're going to give you a high-level overview of the different players that could be involved in the certification process. So we'll discuss who we are as HR.com, as well as the Institute for Human Resources. We'll discuss the HRCI, so the HR Certification Institute. We'll also discuss briefly SHRM and the distinction between the two. Beyond that, Jen will be breaking down the PHR and the SPHR certifications in a little bit more detail, so things like the exam composition as well as the eligibility requirements for each, as well as some of the benefits that certification can have for you. And then beyond that, as mentioned, we'll discuss some of the options that are available to you to help you prepare for one of these exams. And then as we close out, we'll provide you with some additional information about certification, so things like what it might cost to get certified, when you should be booking your exam, where to book your exam, and then at the very end, we'll do a bit of a Q&A period. So if at any time you have any questions, please make use of the question box on your control panel. So that's on the right side of your screen. Just feel free to type in the questions there, and we will get to those in about 25 minutes time. So HR.com, we were founded in 1999, initially as a social networking platform, and although we still are very much a social networking resource for HR professionals, a very large part of what we do and what we're going to be speaking to today is central to HR training, okay, and even more specifically, training for HR certifications, okay, so that's where the IHR comes into play here. So that is the Institute for Human Resources. And I'll actually back up one slide here. As you can see, there are many things HR.com does, really just a general resource site from white papers to blogs and articles, things like that. But a very large part of what we do in terms of content is webinars and live training. Okay, so that is where the Institute for Human Resources comes into play. So really it can be broken down into two areas. One of those areas is certification exam prep. So that's what we'll discuss a little bit today, is really just the services we have to prepare you for an exam. And then for those who are already certified, without getting into too much details, basically you have to earn so many credits every 3 years in order to maintain your professional certification. So we offer webinars which will give you credits, which really just gives you an option as a an easy way and cost-effective way of recertifying. Okay, so let's talk about the HRCI. This is the HR Certification Institute. Okay, and they own the PHR and the SPHR certification. So when you go to take one of these certification exams, the HRCI is the organization that has created that exam, and they update it every year. And really, they're the organization that will ultimately determine whether or not you've passed that exam and earned a certification. Okay, so it's important not to confuse this with SHRM. And the reason for that is in the past, SHRM was the largest distributor and producer of exam prep materials. So this was called the SHRM Learning System for PHR and SPHR. And it was so common, in fact, that many people thought that they were getting their certification through SHRM. And that's actually still the case today, when in fact it's always been the HRCI providing these certifications. And it's slightly more confusing now because SHRM actually does have their own certification, which is called the SHRM CP, which essentially is competing with the PHR and SPHR. So just important to understand the distinction in that the HRCI and SHRM are two completely separate organizations with competing certifications. But of course today we're going to be speaking to the PHR and the SPHR. So having said that, let's look at some of the types of certification that the HRCI offers. So we've broken this down into, I guess, two sections. So we have certifications that pertain to work in the U.S., so that would be the PHR, the Professional in Human Resources, the Senior Professional in Human Resources, or the SPHR. And for those who already hold one of those certifications, you can also get a California certification. So that would be a second exam that you would take afterwards, which would test your aptitude or your knowledge of HR practice in California. Okay, so these certifications are hardwired for those who work and live within the U.S. So when you go to take one of these exams, you'll see questions on those exams that pertain to U.S. policy and laws and what have you. Whereas on the bottom half of this slide here, you'll see there's global certifications. So for those who work and live outside of the U.S., it doesn't make sense for them to have a certification that would test their knowledge of U.S. policy because it wouldn't be as relevant to where they work. Okay, so that's where the GPHR comes into play, so the Global Professional in Human Resources, which is actually a bit of a blend of the two. So there will be a little bit of U.S. policy on there, but mostly international because it's meant for those who work, as it sounds, internationally. And then we have the HRBP and the HRMP, so that's the Business Professional and the Management Professional. So really just think of these as the international equivalents to the PHR and the SPHR. So for those who take an HRMP or HRBP exam, very much, or a large part of the content will be the same as the PHR, SPHR. There just won't be any questions that pertain to U.S. practice of HR. Okay, so that's an overview, I guess a quick overview of the different players involved with certification and the certifications they offer. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our lead program instructor, Jen, and she's going to break down in more detail the PHR and the SPHR certifications for you.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here to speak a little bit more in detail about the PHR and the SPHR, and even more so after we walk through those two exams and what can you expect out of the exams. The next big question will be, oh my goodness, so how do I get ready for those exams? So we'll be able to also tell you not only about what does HR.com have to offer you to get you ready, but I'll also be able to speak in more detail from my own personal experience as to what you need to truly get ready. So having said that, let me just introduce myself. As Brandon mentioned, my name is Jen, and I've had the privilege and the pleasure of leading these programs for the past 3 years since we adopted this preparatory option for our practitioners in the space. So with that said, and no delay, let's talk about the PHR, the Professional in Human Resources exam. This exam focuses on the technical and operational aspects of HR practices, laws, and regulations. HRCI, again, that's the governing body that is actually proctoring this exam. They stipulate that there are 6 bodies of knowledge. So all of those who sit for this exam need to be very well versed in these 6 bodies of knowledge, also known as functional areas. The exam is broken up as follows. 11% of the exam, starting at the top right-hand corner of this pie chart, is devoted to business management and strategy. 24%, which is the greatest weight of this exam, will concentrate on workforce planning and employment. 18% of the questions on this exam will be devoted to HR development. 19% will concentrate on compensation and benefits. 20%, that's the second greatest weight, will devote itself to employee and labor relations. And 8% of the exam will concentrate on risk management. So this is, in other words, how the exam is made up. Many people ask themselves, should I take this exam? So in trying to answer that question for yourself, you'll want to consider some of these critical thoughts and see where you have some commonalities. So ask yourself, do you focus on program implementation? Are you tactical and logistical? Are you accountable to another HR professional within the company? Having some 2 to 4 years of professional exempt level work experience in all HR practices, but yet you don't quite have the breadth and the depth of a rather senior level practitioner. You have not yet had progressive or increasingly complicated work experience and exposure, and your responsibilities focus solely just on the HR department. You're not yet having quite the bird's eye view as a strategic partner in the organization. So commonly, this is for somebody relatively new into the space. Having said that, and to complement that, there are eligibility requirements to sit for this exam. So before I even go into one of these 3 eligibility requirements, please note, HRCI prescribes these eligibility requirements. And while Brandon and I will be fielding any questions that are waiting for us in the questions box, which, by the way, is in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and we welcome you to please put your thoughts and comments and questions in there, and we'll be happily addressing those at the tail end of this session. And we'll do our very best to answer any questions that you may have about eligibility. Let me just put this out there. While Brandon and I are certainly knowledgeable and very well versed with HRCI requirements and standards and so forth, we're not representatives of HRCI, so any advice we give you is just that. I highly suggest for assurance, please reach out to HRCI directly. So having said that, to be able to sit for your PHR exam, you must meet one of the following eligibility requirements. If you hold your master's degree or greater, you will need 1 year of demonstrated professional HR experience. If you hold your bachelor's degree, you will need 2 years of HR experience. And if you hold less than a bachelor's degree, you will need 4 years of professional experience. Again, speaking to the caliber of position that one will have, and or exposure, I should say, professionally, that coincides with some of those critical thoughts as to, is this the exam that you should pursue? So that wraps up the PHR. Let's go through the same motions and talk about the SPHR, the Senior Professional in Human Resources. This exam will focus on a higher end of professional design and planning. This exam is a little bit more strategically inclined, asking people to think more upper-level management. Now, this exam is made up of the very same 6 bodies of knowledge. However, the way in which those bodies of knowledge are broken down are different. So 30% of the exam will focus on business management and strategy. Okay, so translation, 30% of the questions can be expected to be in this particular functional area. 17% of the SPHR exam will devote itself to workforce planning and employment. 19% of the exam concentrates on HR development. 13% focuses on compensation and benefits. 14% of the SPHR exam will devote to employee and labor relations. And once again, coming in at a very small sliver, 7% of the SPHR exam will devote itself to risk management. So once again, if this is the exam that you're considering, I challenge you with these thoughts just to ensure that this is the right fit for you. Ask yourself if you design and plan rather than implement HR policy initiatives, because you focus on the big picture. After all, you will have ultimate accountability in the HR department, hence the term senior in the name of this exam. You will as well have a deep understanding and knowledge across all HR disciplines. You will have some 6 to 8 years of progressive and increasingly complicated HR experience, not to mention, I'll say, strategically aligned experience as well. You use your judgment that is gained with time and knowledge, and you understand the business far beyond just HR, but how it impacts the overall organization, once again drawing on that aligned relationship. If this is the exam that you're nodding your head right now thinking, okay, that's what I'm going to pursue, then please note, here are the eligibility requirements that you will need to meet. Once again, just one of those 3. You will need, if holding your master's degree, 4 years of professional HR experience. If holding your bachelor's degree, you will need 5 years of professional HR experience. And if holding a bachelor's degree, or less than a bachelor's degree, 7 years of professional HR experience. So that sums up the PHR and the SPHR. But it does beg the question, why would one get certified? Well, you will want to get certified because you will be a recognized master in the space. This will enhance your core competencies in the profession. You will have the opportunity to gain internal and external market advantage. while adding value to your own personal marketability. You will have the opportunity to network with field experts and leaders alike, while adding value to the organization because the benefits are reciprocal. In getting certified, this will increase your professional worth, and it has been known to have potential for greater earnings. However, you cannot go to your superiors and hold them to it saying that I said so. Let's now, though, just do a quick side-by-side comparison of the PHR, SPHR exams before I then walk you through how then can we get you prepared to undertake this monstrosity of an exam. So both PHR and SPHR exams are 175 multiple choice questions. There are no short answer, there are no long answer, there is no correspondence, just strictly multiple choice. Those multiple choice questions are broken down into the 6 functional areas as per those pie charts that we walked through. The exams are conducted in a designated testing center. Okay, those testing centers are across the country, coast to coast, a variety of convenient locations through a third-party company. Those, the computerized tests are 3 hours in length. Now the differences will kick in. The PHR is more application and problem solving in caliber and in orientation, whereas the SPHR is more strategic upper level management. And that's the key difference, which also speaks to the eligibility requirements as well as, again, the kind of caliber professional that would be attracted to either one of them. But please note, one is not a prerequisite of the next. Now, both exams are broken up into cognitive classification. So regardless of which area any one question might be challenging your knowledge, understanding, and so forth on, the question will be challenging your cognitive ability. Once again, this is a competency-based exam. So as you can see just in the very last row here, 25 and 15% of the questions, PHR, SPHR respective, will challenge your knowledge and comprehension. So this is just challenging your ability to recall facts, interpret concepts, and so forth. Half of the questions on both exams equally will challenge your ability to apply and problem solve. These are real-life problems or scenarios. And then 25 and 35% of the questions, respectively, will challenge your ability to synthesize and evaluate, which really means how can you put together your critical judgment, your logic, and bring together distant related items. So with all of that said, you breathe deep because the question now becomes, how then can I prepare? You will get out what you put in. It is recommended to prepare for some 4 to 6 months. So with that said, we have a fantastic lineup of opportunities to help you get ready. Depending, of course, how you choose and what is best suited for you, there is, starting from left to right, the option to purchase the materials directly, in which will include 6 study manuals, okay, print and online, hundreds of flashcards, online practice exams, and that is priced at $450. All of which, by the way, is accessible at HR.com/prep course. We as well do have a refresher course. This, however, is time sensitive, and that time has since passed. So for those of you, and I trust that those of you in this session right now are preparing for the winter testing period. In that case, we will launch those days as the testing window approaches, so stay tuned for days to come. But this is where we take a 20-hour, 4-day approach across 2 consecutive weekends and really just sharpen up the tools in your toolbox. Okay, this is not recommended, however, to be your sole, only relied on way to prepare. Like I said, we're just talking about sharpening up those test-taking skills, abilities, and knowledges. Coming soon, date to be confirmed, we will have a self-paced comprehensive program online, which is a very nice approach to our blended learning system. But even more so, which I will speak in more detail now, is our staple product, which is our 16-week comprehensive program. So let's actually dive right into that, because that's actually where spaces are a little bit more limited and the urgency exists. So let's talk about our 16-week online course. In enrolling in our 4-month program, you will receive up to 30 hours of live online classes in a small interactive setting. Here we have twice a week, every week, 1-hour sessions. You will receive 6 study manuals, those being print manuals. You will receive quick testing flashcards, access to over 800 practice exam questions broken up to coincide with the study manuals, so very nicely organized into part learning. You will receive coaching and mentoring from your instructor, study tips and testing tutorials, and all of this is packaged with a free HR.com profile. I have here a snapshot for you of one of, or I should say a page, an extraction of our study guides. And this picture, I have to admit, doesn't even do justice, to be honest with you, because what I think is great about this particular study guide or this learning system that we've partnered with is there's a lot of illustrations, a lot of graphics where need be, but more importantly, the language that is used, the illustrations that are used, the examples that are used really ensure that there is a high transfer of learning and understanding. So we really take pride in that. Here we have a visual for you of what a practice question looks like. All of the practice questions, or I should say, in fact, the format of the tests, the functionalities, echo the real exam. So to that extent, there's limited elements of surprise just from a functionality standpoint. So the functionalities that you're able to flag a question so you can draw attention to it in moments or a little bit later into the test. The strikeout feature, so you can eliminate distractors. But important here as well, for the purpose of a practice exam, which is valuable for learning purposes, is the fact that you'll get feedback and also where you can go and draw on more learning and understanding to fill in that hole. So referencing what page, what unit, and so forth. We have here as well now a snapshot of what our flashcards look like, which are highly recommended for individual or paired learning. So if you have a study buddy, and we'll help you, pair up with a study buddy as well. Where on one side of the flashcard is some key vocabulary, and on the other side is a definition or an explanation. It's not because you need to memorize terms, but it's very important that you need to understand them so that you can relate them, which speaks to being able to synthesize. Brandon now is going to speak to how you can go about enrolling yourself into one of our programs.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jen. So as we close out here, I'm just going to discuss not only the availability and scheduling of the classes that we offer, but also specifically the exam. So when you should be booking your exam, when you can take your exam, how much it costs, etc. And then we'll also do some Q&A at the end. Okay, so as you can see, all of the courses coming up for us are starting in July, August, and September. So since these are 16-week courses, these are leading up to the testing window, which runs from November 1st to January 31st. I'll touch on that in just a second. But again, as you can see here, all of our courses are ideally outside of work hours, so in the evenings, either Mondays and Thursdays or Wednesdays and Sundays. And the cost of our program is $950, which does not include the exam fee. Okay, so whether you're taking your PHR or your SPHR, there is a fee paid to the HRCI just to take that exam. Okay, so for the PHR, it's $400, and for the SPHR, it's $525, so a little bit more expensive. So all of this, this being the eligibility check, booking your exam, scheduling your exam, all those things that pertain specifically to the exam taking, that is done through the HRCI. So regardless of who you choose to prepare for the exam with, the exam taking will always be done through the HRCI. So you can start at the HRCI.org website. You'll see a button in the upper area of the site which says apply. Okay, so that's where you start. So again, just speaking to some dates here, the next testing window, which our courses are in preparation for, again runs from November 1st through January 31st. And you can actually book your exam anytime now up until September 11th. Okay, so you can still book your exam for a short window after September 11th, but there is a late fee involved with that. So if you are planning on taking your exam this fall, so anywhere between November and January, I highly recommend you book it before September 11th to avoid that late fee. Okay, last thing here before we get to questions, this is just some additional resources for you. So these are some places you might want to visit. First is just the HR.com homepage for prep courses. So this is where you can get an overview and enrollment for the courses that we offer. Below that is our LinkedIn group where we post updates not only about our own services, but also just any updates within the certification industry in general. Below that is the HRCP website. So this is a company that we are partnered with to offer the courses that we do. So they are the producer of the study guide. So if you want to have a more detailed look at those, feel free to check out their site. And then lastly is the HRCI website. So again, your eligibility checks, booking your exam, scheduling your exam, all of that good stuff is done through the HRCI website. So that's really the starting point. The first thing that you want to do before anything else is make sure that you're actually eligible to take the exam. So you're going to want to go to the HRCI website and have your eligibility formally checked by applying. Okay, as mentioned, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to submit them in the question box on your control panel. We have a few here waiting for us, so if there's any dead air or if it goes quiet, it's just because we're reading through the questions. So we have a really good question here. I guess asking for us to summarize the difference between the PHR SPHR, which is again HRCI, versus the SHRM, and to speak to that to a market value point of view. Okay, so what I'm about to say is strictly my opinion. Of course, I welcome you to do your own research, but my opinion is that the HRCI, and more specifically the PHR and SPHR, has been around really for decades. Okay, so there's just over 135,000 people who hold one of these certifications. So you can imagine how well established and more importantly, well recognized that is in the space. You might find if you go to apply for a new job and you're looking at the requirements to apply for a job, you might see PHR certification on there as a requirement, whereas it's probably a little bit more rare to find someone asking for the SHRM certification as a requirement just because it's so new. Okay, so it's not to say that in 5-10 years time the SHRM certification will be sought after and well recognized, but the way things are right now, it's just the PHR and SPHR have been around for so long, lots of credibility associated with those credentials. So I would personally recommend it over the SHRM certification at this time, but again, things can really change. We are a provider of certification exam prep, and we're somewhat agnostic as to which certification you would choose. So we have one question asking about, for someone who's PHR certified, how would they move to being GPHR certified? So really, you'd have to take a separate exam. So if you have your PHR, there's no real way to fast track your way to get a GPHR. So if you start taking on more international assignments, working internationally, and you want to get your GPHR, again, you'd have to go and take the separate exam. Although having already completed the PHR, you'd certainly be more well equipped to successfully pass that GPHR.
We have a great question here, and I'm just paraphrasing from somebody in attendance who's asking really what constitutes to qualify. So in terms of areas of specialty in HR, and unless, of course, you are a generalist, some people may have a variety of different specialties. So some may be a little bit more compensation and benefits, some may be a little bit more employee relations, and what have you. And I'm just collecting my thoughts, HRCI acknowledges that we all may have a variety of different specialties. That might be the case. It may be more appropriate. In that case, I would recommend, however it warrants a little bit more investigation, please, on your part, pursuing the PHR. So we'll just take me, if I may, as a random example. And I've done myself as a little bit of a guinea pig or a test pilot, if I may. My areas of specialty would be in training development, adult education, recruitment selection, and so forth. My education would also complement that, and having the eligibility requirements, I qualify, for example, for the PHR. But clearly, my experience professionally does not tap into all the realms and even to speak to all the functional areas. So definitely food for thought, but please do feel welcome to contact HRCI just to confirm.
So we have a question here which kind of brings up the topic of international certification. So the question is pertaining to which certification is relevant in Canada. Okay, so we did respond to that personally in the question box. Basically, there's another accrediting body in Canada called the HRPA, and their certification is called the CHRP. Okay, but this isn't to say that you can't earn your PHR or SPHR certification. So again, Jen and I aren't extremely well versed in approving what is and what is not eligibility or eligible work for one of these certifications, but I'm quite confident that even HR experience in Canada would still be relevant for those seeking their PHR or SPHR, which is again a U.S. certification. So basically, bottom line there is if you do work outside of the U.S., you still can take a U.S. certification exam. Okay, so I think that appears to be the only questions that we have for the group, but of course we always welcome any comments, feedback, or questions that you have at a later time. So you can reach out to us by email, certification@hr.com. You can give us a call, or we also have a live chat service on our site where you can reach us during business hours. Okay, so if anybody wants a copy of the slide deck from today, of course, just send me an email, certification@hr.com. Be happy to pass that off to you. And on behalf of Jen and myself, we do thank you for attending today, and we hope that this was beneficial for you in helping you understand, just really at a high level, the whole certification process for those of you looking to get started. Okay, so thanks again for attending, and we hope you have a great day.